Welcome to Show Up, Stand Up, and Speak Up. I'm Sheri Godfrey, your host, and I am absolutely pleased to be bringing an amazing story to the forefront today. I want you to meet my friend, Maggie Maier. She is the CEO. Yes, ladies, you heard that right. The CEO. She is the Chief Energy Officer. I absolutely love how you preface that, Maggie, CEO, Chief Energy Officer. I think we need a lot of you in today's world. So, ladies, we're going to start off without pulling any punches. I've had the pleasure of having some really good intimate conversations with Maggie, and boy, let me tell you, does she have an awful lot to share. And if any of what we are going to talk about today resonates with you, percolates anything up to the surface, or possibly triggers anything underlying that is coming up, I really do recommend that you reach out to Maggie and have a conversation so that you can decompress and debrief anything that bubbles up. So we're going to start with probably the hardest thing that Maggie has ever had to overcome in life. At the age of 27, her beautiful, vibrant son took his own life through suicide. Maggie, can you walk us through that period of your life?
Sure. Would you like to know a little bit about that before, in terms of,
We
how
would
this came?
love to know a little bit about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I had a beautiful son named Adam. He was a very boisterous, super social, loved everybody, very gregarious little boy. We put him in soccer at 8 years old. He was quite the athlete by the time he was in his teens. He was working out. He was the only Canadian on 2 American soccer teams at one point. And if he hadn't had an injury, he was actually being scouted to go to university in the States. But sometimes, we have these winding roads that take us elsewhere. And so my son needed a backup plan. And, we sat down and talked about that. And he decided then to come and live with me. And he had, finished high school, but a lot of these young kids, they often don't know what they want to do. And so I said, you're welcome to live with me. You need to work or go to school. You can live rent free, but you've got to do one or the other. You're not going to just sit at home. And so he decided to work for a few years. He got into the bar scene, and then he ended up going back to college and taking, entrepreneurship and all kinds of different things. And eventually was working at TD Bank. He decided he wanted to be an investment banker. So he really, really upped his game and really got to know himself. And we spent a lot of time. And I have a lot of entrepreneurs coming through my door at the time. And so he was being introduced to them. So I was just loving, you love, right, when your kids start to develop, and he was becoming a man and the whole thing. And I remember one night we had a conversation. My son also struggled with mental health issues. And it started off when he was 8 or 9. He would have like these tics, like these really weird, like funny tics. And then he started to bark like a seal, like he'd go, up, up. And so that's really Tourette's syndrome, which is a neurological disorder, but it went away. And so we didn't really think anything of it. I didn't know anything about mental health back then either. And then, unbeknownst to me, because he was living with his father, we'd split by then. When he played soccer, he would get a lot of these compulsive, mental, intrusive thoughts. So he had to literally tape his fingers together before playing soccer, because otherwise it would distract him. And he was a striker, so he was, always making goals, and it was taking away from his ability to focus and concentrate, which I found out much later. So obviously there were a lot of issues going on. I struggled with OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, mentally for a very long time myself. And you can't see it. You don't know that that person's struggling with it. So my son and I
So
were,
Maggie, not to stop our story short, but I just want to interject here for just a moment and
sure.
let some of those pieces percolate with some of the moms who are probably listening to you right now. So for the moms of you who are listening, as Maggie is sharing all of the greatness and the goodness that her son brought to the table, just the joy for life and watching him elevate himself up and find himself, let's just take a moment and appreciate who he is for the true being that you brought into this world. I can hear the gift that he brought. I can also hear from a mother's outside view the looking back and perhaps not seeing some of the things that we weren't aware of. So for the moms who are watching right now, if this is you, if you were sitting right now wondering if something is going on but you're not sure, we know more now. And when we know better, we do better. So I really want you to listen in and lean into what Maggie is saying, is that now as she looks back and reflects, there perhaps in hindsight is things that she saw that she sees now. And there's no guilt to that, and there's no judgment to that, because I can tell you that with all the beauty that Maggie brings, she's a beautiful mother. And we can feel that and see that just by how she describes her lovely Adam. So Maggie, I just wanted to have the moms have the opportunity to sit for just a moment and really appreciate where you've been, and give them the opportunity to reflect perhaps on where they're at right now. Mm-hmm. So please tell me more about Adam.
Sure, and it's very true. You know, we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't really know anything. I know a lot more now, and that's part of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because now I really see signs. I really understand it. But when you're growing up, you know, with your children, you don't always see that. So I'm a recovered alcoholic. I've been sober now over 10 years. And so my son knows all about my story and, you know, my own background. I came from an abusive background and developed a lot of mental health issues as a result of that. And but he was so proud of me, you know, for quitting. And so we talked a lot about alcohol and alcohol abuse and drug abuse and things like that. And so he knew about the potential for alcoholism. You know, if a family member has it, right, the kids may have more of a tendency and a likelihood to become addicted. And I remember one night before he went out, we were talking about marijuana. And, you know, back in the day when I was very young, I smoked it and I got very paranoid. So I stopped it. And my drug of choice was always alcohol moving forward. I wanted to have a conversation with my son because we've talked a lot about drugs and not smoking. He never would touch cigarettes. But, you know, this whole concept right now with marijuana, back then they were talking about legalizing it. So there puts in this attitude and this frame that, you know, maybe it's not as bad as you think it is. Marijuana, you know, there is research showing that it can help with cancer and different issues, which definitely is true. However, what's not being talked about is that the THC now in marijuana is much higher and it's synthetic and it's very potentially damaging to the brain, especially the developing brain. And, you know, you have a developing brain until about the age of 25. So when my son was around, I remember 23, 24, we started talking about marijuana and I would just say things like, you know, I don't know a lot about marijuana, but just given your own mental health issues, right? Your brain is not really working 100%. Don't put a drug in it because you don't really know. And I remember my son, and I'll never forget this, saying, Mom, it's just a weed. It's harmless. It can't hurt you. And I said, I don't agree with that. But, you know, the kid's 24. Moms, you can relate to this. There's lots of wisdom we have, but our children may not always listen, right? And so my son was really working hard and I was seeing obsessive issues with him. And, you know, I can get like that too. He was a high achiever, always on the move, you know, a lot of jobs. I mean, he wouldn't sit down and have lunch or dinner with me. He was always taking his food downstairs to the basement. And I was getting concerned and I was thinking, you know, he's going off the rails a little bit. He's getting too obsessed about achieving. And he didn't want to be a millionaire. This kid wanted to be a billionaire. And so I would say things like, okay, let's make our first 100,000 first, you know, before we get into the billions. So there was this extreme need to achieve and really reach high goals and a lot of pressure on him. So when he announced to me one Thursday night that he was going away for the weekend with his frat friends, he'd met a bunch of frat friends from different universities. I was really happy that I knew he needed to decompress. He needed to take some time out. Unfortunately, what I didn't know was that a lot of them were really smoking a lot of pot. My son didn't want to do it. There were, I guess, a couple of guys that just kept pestering him. Oh, come on, Adam, just take a little bit, take a little bit. Adam kept saying, no, no, no. And then finally he got very angry and he took the bong and he smoked, I think, 5 or 10 hits. And, you know, sometimes when you're angry, like you'll do even more. Oh, I'll show them or just get them off my back.
Proving the point.
So, yeah, and because I've talked to my son a lot about peer pressure, and usually he just tells people no, and that's the end of it. So that night, that didn't happen. And so the next morning I got a phone call, and I could just tell by his voice something was really wrong. And my son's a bit of a prankster, so I thought he was kidding around. And he just said, "Mom, stay really calm. Something's really happened. I have a friend who's driving me home." And so I just waited. He didn't want to talk about it on the phone. I had no idea. And ladies, moms, you know what your child looks like. You know their eyes. And the minute my son walked in, I could tell by his eyes that something really bad had happened. He didn't look the same. He didn't act the same. And it turned out that this THC was too strong for my son. And basically, over a number of months, my son began to really deteriorate. First of all, it was his anxiety got wrapped up. His OCD went through the roof. He also became very, very depressed, very paranoid, very, very anxious. And then he started to really isolate. And my son is a very social boy. And all of a sudden, he wasn't talking to people. He wasn't bathing. I remember going downstairs and saying, "Adam, you need a shower. You're smelling." And we had this agreement where I had things I wanted to do with him. I do a variety of tests and things, and my son at the beginning was, "No, I want to go to the hospital. I want to get medication. That's going to solve it." And so I just knew in my heart that wasn't going to be enough for this. We'd have to do a lot more, and my son was not prepared to do that. So he stayed in my house, and about 6 months later, it was just going from bad to worse. And then he was getting more angry. He was getting violent. He was, his life was falling apart. He couldn't read that much anymore. He couldn't see properly. He was losing his balance. He was jogging for a while, and then he would jog at night because he couldn't handle the sunlight. So he was deteriorating in all ways. And eventually he decided to move back and live with his father. He was talking a lot about suicide. And I have doctors that I work with in the States, and I wanted to do tests with them. I wanted him to see them. I even wanted to get him over to see Dr. Daniel Amen, who is a foremost brain imagery specialist. But my son just never wanted to do any of that. And then he was really going online talking about suicide. A lot of different things happened. And I was not accepting my son's desire to die. I thought, he's too young. We need to try new things. Unfortunately, he just kept taking different medications. And I'm really convinced that some of those medications actually caused suicidality, made him think about it more. So just imagine, he's not in the same town anymore, and I'm worried sick. I can't sleep. Just listening to your kid talk about suicide is so tough. That he got so negative, and he just was giving up, the hopelessness. And here's my son was the opposite. He was a fighter like me, and no matter what happens, we'll get through this. And but what was happening was he had been so brain damaged, and then all these different medications on top of it, which I feel really made it worse. He started to get burning pain in his brain, in his body, and he would cry and he'd say, "I feel like I'm being burned with acid. I'm on fire." And his whole body was like this. So imagine one day I'm at home, and someone lets me know that my son is on the front page of the Toronto Star saying, "I will commit suicide. I will not live like this." And it was devastating. Okay. And so I'm in the, me, I combine science with healing, and there's lots of things that I believe we could have done. I had doctors on call that were willing to work with him. He never once even had a brain scan. Not one of his psychiatrists even deemed that necessary, which I find just shocking. And then it just got so bad that eventually my son, he started to advocate for MAID, medical assistance in dying, and he started to advocate for the right to die for the mentally ill. And he wanted to show that people with mental illness also have physical illness problems. And so on one hand, I was really proud of my son, because how many kids do you know living in their parents' basement would start advocating on the behalf of, thousands of other people struggling and suffering, knowing that he doesn't have much time. So my son had to, he tried to get physician-assisted dying. There was a lot of publicity about this, but nobody wanted to touch him. And there's doctors saying that he's so young, 24, 25 years old. Who wants to help a young person die? I mean, I understand all that. And then eventually my son joined something called Exit International, and they basically teach you how to kill yourself in a safe
Wow.
manner. Because my son was talking to me, and imagine as a mom that your son or daughter's coming up to you and saying, "Oh, Mom, I'm looking at how many feet it has to be before you jump off a bridge or a building." He was afraid that if he tried to do something and he didn't do it, he might end up, a vegetable or in a coma in the hospital, which can happen. You've heard of people even attempting to kill themselves with a gun, and they end up getting brain damage.
Yeah.
So my son, eventually he illegally imported a drug from China. This drug is known to just help you sleep, and that's how you die. So in the end, my son went to a motel room in Windsor, drove there in the middle of the night, and took this drug and died by suicide alone, because me and his father, we would have been charged for illegally abetting a crime. So it's legal to die by suicide, but it's illegal to have family members around. And he couldn't get help from the doctors. So it was and I remember my son even saying, "Mom, I don't want anything to happen to your business. And Dad, you're a professor at the University of Windsor. I don't want anything to happen to you. So I'm going to be doing this alone. One day I'm just going to leave the house in the middle of the night and I'm not going to come back." And that's what happened.
Wow. So for the moms who are listening in right now, really hearing the pain that will never go away for Maggie as she shares the wonder of her boy, the capacity for life that he had, the advocacy for others, even in a state of not knowing what he can do for himself. So much goodness. I want you to really sit and think about all that he brought to the world, all of the joy that he brought to his mother and his father, and ultimately the choice that he had to make that he felt was the only choice that he could make to remove him from pain. Now, if there's any mom or dad who are paying attention right now and you're being triggered, please reach out to Maggie. And I'm suggesting that you reach out to Maggie because she has been there, and I know that she will offer you no judgment. If there's signs that you're seeing and you just don't know what to do with them, reach out to Maggie. We all need a lifeline, and there is no shame in asking for help. What you would actually be doing is allowing the legacy of her son to continue forward as she helps you and your family through some really, really heartfelt emotional decisions that can impact today, tomorrow, and the future down the road. And I know that Maggie wants nothing more than for you and your family to have a prosperous future, a healthy future. And I think really what this brings us to is I thought it was so important to share this story, one, because we often don't talk about this. And in this day and age, we need to be having these really difficult conversations so that moms and dads know you're not alone. That we do believe that medication has a place in the world and a place in life, but we also believe that there's alternatives to medication. And that is actually what Maggie does, is that she helps families heal from stress, anxiety, and depression without prescription medications. Now, we're not saying pitch everything that you have, throw caution to the wind, and see where life takes you. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that there are alternatives and there are options. That again, medication is a short-term solution, and it, yes, may be a long-term solution for those that the proof is in the pudding and it is needed. So we're not saying to be reckless with you or your loved one, but we are saying that there's options. And there's options that may help you and your family to actually come to the life fulfilled that you're supposed to come to. And I'm going to give you a little bit of credentials here, just so we know that one, Maggie has lived the life experience. It should need no other justification. Drop the mic, end of story. She has credibility out the wazoo based on the experience that she has had in her life's dealing. She also holds a degree in economics and political science. So we have a smart cookie sitting here with us. She is brains and beauty all wrapped into one. She has a nutritional balancing diploma. She has progressive EFT certification, and she has also taken courses on suicide and bereavement. So when I suggest that you reach out to her, I don't do that haphazardly. I do that knowing that Maggie has also done the work in light of what Adam has gone through, so that she can be an advocate and she can serve her community. And where her sweet spot is, I am going to tell you that CEO, Chief Energy Officer, is not going to the wayside. She really excels at helping high achieving business owners, corporate leaders, those working within the government industry. She's worked with police and first responders. The list can go on. She really does help people move through trauma and PTSD. And she knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that when we bring mental health to the forefront and we address it, that we can come up with solutions to move forward. That you can have a high thriving business, you can hold a position of power, and you can have really great glory in work and in life. Like, how freaking amazing is that? All of what Maggie has been through, she is giving it as a gift back to the world in the format of a business. I mean, what a healing journey she's been on. Maggie, tell me about some of the work that you do. I'm just awe-inspired by how you've been able to transition through and really bring this into the world at a time that we need this more than ever.
We certainly do. Anxiety, depression, all of that is really going up right now. Stress, financial uncertainty, it's causing a lot of issues amongst families. So I speak and I give a talk on what I call the 3 R's roadmap to productivity and peak performance. So the 3 R's that I refer to are, number 1 is remove, rebalance, and reframe. So when I talk about remove is we're looking at removing toxic chemicals in the body. People don't realize that every day they're consuming chemicals, they're putting chemicals on their body with all their body products. There's so many chemicals, even in water, like lead, arsenic, antimony. And all of these chemicals impact your body and your biochemistry, and they also can affect your mood. The second thing I look at is your minerals. Many of us, well, we all need minerals, for hundreds of different ways of helping the body, but most of us don't have balanced minerals. And believe it or not, when you have unbalanced minerals, it can create fatigue, depression, anxiety. People, I'm working with someone right now with Tourette's. People that are autistic often have a lot of toxic chemicals and unbalanced minerals. But even entrepreneurs, like, they're pushing. So mentally, they're very strong people. But you're pushing so much and you're not realizing that you're actually undermining your own biochemistry, because the more stress you have, even if you can handle it, you're actually pushing down your minerals. So I have, 50 and 60-year-olds coming in with very low minerals, but I also have 20 and 30-year-olds, the same, type of people like my son, high achievers who are really into pushing. And so a lot of times, several years ago, I wasn't feeling very well, and I had depression, I had constipation and fatigue. That can be very common, right? And then it turned out I do something called hair and mineral testing, and so I tested my hair, and I actually had toxic chemicals. And then very shortly after, I was diagnosed with cancer. So instead of doing the regular chemo and radiation route, I had thyroid cancer. I chose to basically follow the protocol that we do with hair and mineral testing, which is removing the toxic chemicals, which I did, and then rebalance my minerals, which makes me stronger, which balances my mood and my body. And I was cancer-free in 6 months. It also really helps. I see a lot of people coming in with anxiety and depression. And this is one of you talked about the sweet spot, and this is really important to me. And this is what I want to get the information out, is that People with anxiety and depression and OCD in particular tend to have very unbalanced ratios of copper to zinc. Now, zinc is a very calming mineral. We don't have it in our soil anymore, so it's not in our food anymore. And the ratios are critical. And so what we're seeing is a lot of people struggling with mental health issues tend to have these unbalanced ratios, especially in the copper zinc. And I finally got a hair test from my son. I had to beg for that for about a year. He just said, I'm only going to give it to you to get you off my back, you know, the typical kid, right? But
Yeah.
I knew biochemically that there were things wrong with him, and I wanted scientific proof, and I got it. His toxic copper was through the roof, and he hardly had any zinc. He didn't have selenium. He didn't have different minerals that help the body detox. So I'm really convinced, and I want to get this information out. I'm seeing this all the time. I work with entrepreneurs, you know, some are women that are hormonal, gaining weight, metabolism issues. That's often unbalanced minerals. And so I've had clients come in, you know, we do the test. It's very easy. We send it to the lab, and you basically get a customized supplementation program. So the lab literally makes customized supplements geared to your own biochemistry to solve those problems and rebalance you and help you start detoxifying the body. And the energy, the mood, the changes I've seen are so remarkable. And I'm convinced if I had known this many, many years ago when my son was young, maybe my son might have been alive today. So I know as the mom what it's like to lose a child. I also know what it's like to watch a son suffer with mental illness. And so for those of you who are dealing with it either personally or maybe your husband or wife or your children, there really is hope. And, you know, I combine science with natural healing remedies.
Oh, science with natural healing remedies. Let's just let that percolate, because you don't really hear that in that combination. I love that Maggie really wants to dig deep and find the answers, the proven answers from a scientific background. So it is what it is when it's sitting on a piece of paper, all there in black and white. And then if you can move through that from a natural perspective and help to heal the body on the inside, so that on the outside, everything around us is just getting better. We're healing from the inside out. Simply amazing what Maggie has done. Simply amazing. Now, if anyone, again, is sitting, contemplating, thinking about it, stress, anxiety, depression, as I talk to Maggie, we are mid-COVID in Canada, US, globally. It's not going away anytime soon. Our stress levels through the roof. Business owners have lost income. There's businesses that sadly have had to close. There's pivots going on like there is no tomorrow. And if you're anything like me, once all of this is done, we never want to hear about another pivot again, as long as we live. Financial disruption can create hardship on families. So not just from a business perspective, but also we bring that home when you open the door and come back into your house. And I say open the door because some businesses are doing curbside pickup. So they're still going into their business, although people aren't walking in through their doors. So we're sitting at a really pivotal time, a really crucial time, when our outside stressors are really magnifying any internal stressors that may have been in existence before that. And what Maggie has said, there's hope. There's hope. In all of this, there's hope. So Maggie, if somebody were to take you up on that little glimmer of hope, what would that look like?
Well, I actually offer complimentary consultations. You know, we start usually with a phone conversation and then we may move it to Zoom. I do a lot of work now virtually, obviously. And I just listen. You know, the first thing I want to do is I want to hear about you, what you're feeling, what you're going through, to be your witness. I think people really need to feel listened to. And then, we go through, a health assessment, that type of thing. And then people will decide, sometimes they choose to do hair and mineral testing with me, but I also do coaching. I have 3-month and 6-month coaching programs. And remember, I talked about the 3 R's. Well, there's a final R, and that's about reframing your mindset. And I do a lot of emotional work, mindset shifting. For example, if you've been on medication for some time, you'll hear people say, they don't say, I'm struggling with depression or depression symptoms. They'll say, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm this. It actually becomes their identity. And so I actually help people shift that. That's not your identity. It's a symptom. But once we go in deep and deal with the biochemistry and start rebalancing you, then it's a lot easier also to shift the mindset and just to help people. For example, I've worked with young women who are alcoholics, binge drinkers, and in 6 months, we've done all kinds of work and they're back to work. They're not drinking. Some are in AA, some are not, but they have this whole world available to them that they didn't have before. And it takes someone believing in you, but also I've struggled myself. I've had mental health issues that I've also overcome. So I've really been there and I have lived experience. And I'm also open to speaking to moms who are also struggling. A lot of parents watch their children struggle with mental illness, and they often want their kids to get help, but often they need help first because they're so worn out by it. Living with somebody that's an alcoholic or an addict or with mental health issues is really draining and really damages your own body and your own mindset. So they always say, put the oxygen mask on the mom or dad first, and then you can also have more energy and the ability to help your children as well. And then, of course, I do work with CEOs of companies. One of my clients was Dr. Wayne Dyer. I'm sure you know of him. And he was in, really great shape and ate organically, but he had all kinds of heavy metals in his body and, mineral imbalances. So it doesn't matter what you look like. You can look super great and be very thin and eat well, but there's still things going on biochemically that we need to shift. So I'm seeing more and more women also with very high levels of aluminum, and that's related to cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. More women in their 60s are being diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So it's really important to find out exactly where you're at, and let's start detoxing you so that you can have a really, really great quality of life and a lot more energy as you're getting older. Because we want to do more things as we're getting older. We don't want to do less, right?
I agree with you 100% that my bucket list continues to grow the older that I get. And I certainly need to have the energy to show up and do that day in and day out. So, what I love most of all about this is that be your witness. If you were sitting right now with any of the items that Maggie has listed, if there's somebody in your family with suicidal thoughts or tendencies, if there's stress, anxiety, depression, perhaps over this last year, I see it all too often on social media that alcohol has become more present in our homes as it allows us to move through the motion day to day when we really don't know what tomorrow might look like. COVID has hit many families in many different ways really hard. And I believe that as we're now starting to move through and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So I don't want to sit and say that this is the path that we're going to be in forever. But as that light goes through the tunnel and people start to emerge out, I do believe that there is going to be a rise in addiction. There is going to be a rise in stress, anxiety, depression. Mental health really will need to be on the forefront. And God bless, I know that our medical system up here in Canada does the best with the tools that they have. But I would wager to say that there could be some more tools in that toolbox to help our families out. And that maybe that's not the support that you're needing, or maybe that support hasn't helped you and you're looking for alternatives. Maggie is that alternative. She is that alternative. She is that hope. And it's not just for families. So families, of course, she has a soft spot for families. She does not want you having to go through the experiences that she and her Adam have gone through. But for anybody who is listening in and you know who you are, you're that high achiever, achieving business owner that who does it all? You do it all. And why do you do it all? Because nobody does it quite the way that you can. Nobody does it just as good as you do. And you want to make sure that all of your ducks are swimming in a row. And ladies, we know it's impossible to corral the ducks. They just don't swim in a row. But I know that there's some of you listening who are hell-bent on making them do just that exactly when they want to do it. Corporate leaders, it's the same. You cannot lead a team if you yourself are struggling from a point of unwell. And if we need to shift that mindset, that is one of the R's. It's the reframe that Maggie does. Now, if you check out our description, our description in the bio, excuse me for that, you are going to find Maggie's website. You're going to find Maggie's email. You're going to find that there's a link to some extra material that if you'd like to download the offering that she has, that it's a place to start, but it is just a place to start. I encourage you to take the hand of somebody who's walked your path. She's not just going to feed you a line because she's lived it. She does come to you with no judgment. You're in a safe place with Maggie. She's ready to walk you on that journey to start with the first steps. She's ready to hear you. Ladies, when's the last time that your emotional well-being has been heard? And she's willing to be your witness. Maggie, as a mom to a mom, I know that today was extremely difficult to come, and it was a really vulnerable share. You have shared Adam with us. I love that I can go on your Facebook and that I can see Adam. I love that Adam is still a person who exists in all of his glory because he is your son and you are his mother. And I'm really grateful that you were able to take the opportunity to come in to let other moms know that you hear them, you feel them, and that you are here from them from a family perspective and a business perspective, that you will give them hope and the tools so that they will create a really good work-life balance. Maggie, time is precious, and I really do appreciate that you've come to my table today and you have given of your precious time. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. And again, in the bio, you want to check out Maggie's links, and I know that you want to have that coffee conversation with her. Thanks for tuning in. Until we chat again.